Hello and welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast, where we talk about all things sustainability, environmentalism, health, and the whole broad spectrum of what is going on in the world. This week, we are doing the monthly paradigm, where we break down all the recent news, or at least some of it that we find important when it comes to environmental factors. We look at a deep dive story and some headlines, and of course finish up with some good news, because who doesn't love that? And on these episodes, I am joined with my beautiful co-host, Sharna Harrington.
Hello.
We are together here on this lovely, windy, coldy day. For those on videos, you can probably see behind me a clothesline going absolutely bonkers.
It's actually stopped now.
Oh, it's actually stopped, okay.
But it is Melbourne, so it will go again.
Yes, it will. So if you do hear rain on this, my apologies. We cannot control the elements, and this is part of living through a La Nina. For this, what is it, second time in a row?
I think it's the third.
Third, right.
Oh, is it? Anyway.
Either second or third. All I know is that next year they said it's extremely, extremely unlikely that we're going to have it again. So I'll take that as a win. Today, the key deep dive we're going into is food loss and food waste. One of the biggest contributors to global greenhouse gases, and something that can totally be reduced by a huge amount. But first, a personal update and the headlines. So we've been learning Spanish for 2 months now.
Is that how long it's been?
I'm on a 66-day streak with Duolingo. So, I'm not even going to try. Yo hablo español un poco.
Sí.
Sí. That's a good word to know. Sí.
Yeah.
Sí. It's like vegetariano or something, vegetarian. So we're learning the key phrases, which is exciting to learn another language.
We're learning this because we intend on spending a couple of months in Central America next year and experiencing all that the world has to offer us in that part of the world.
100%. It's going to be so beautiful. So I'm glad we're learning a bit of Spanish. And also we are in Melbourne now, so lovely catching up with friends and family and celebrating your birthday, which was fun. We got cultured on that day, went to a museum.
We did.
What else did we get up to?
Went to Acme as well with some family, and then lots of good dinner. All food, not just dinners, but all good food.
Yeah, we went to this place called, I can never say it because it's actually fungi tortellini or something like that. And it was like it's kind of fancy, but it's a full plant-based diner place. It's in the center of Melbourne, which is fantastic. And we started off with calamari. Insanely good calamari, like the best I've ever had. And then you had a carbonara, and I had swordfish. So really...
Which we kind of think was...
Eggplant,
maybe? But it didn't, not sure.
Not sure. And the chef would not share his recipe or what it was.
Totally fair enough.
But yeah, some incredible plant-based food. It's good to be in Melbourne because the food here is actually impeccable.
We are so lucky.
Do you want to kick us off with our first headline?
The most polluting fossil fuel project currently proposed in Australia. So Australia's largest polluting gas company is called Woodside Energy, and they plan to drill and hammer into the offshore Scarborough, which is Western Australian gas field, to extract more polluting gas.
Lovely.
This will affect about 12 marine parks in WA's pristine waters, including the famous and somewhere we really want to go, Nigaloo Reef.
Okay.
Not to mention all of the wildlife and the habitats that will be affected.
Dolphin heaven, turtle heaven, whale heaven. Yep. WA is really such a beautiful nesting ground along their migrations. So that's really sad to hear.
Apparently there's a lot of endangered turtles that live along there as well. So it's it's a really dangerous spot to be drilling into the earth. So Woodside, this project, its annual greenhouse gas emissions it will be equal to that of 15 coal stations.
Right. Okay. So that's pretty hectic.
And that's more polluting than the planned Adani mine. So that isn't going ahead.
There was a huge uproar about the hashtag Stop Adani.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
big, all right.
Let's hope that we can get the same momentum flowing for Woodside. I've signed a petition for both of us already. We've emailed some politicians in WA, gotten all over that, and we can link in the show notes to how you can do that as well. So they actually write up an email for you. You just write in your details and you send it. As you saw, it was a very well-written, intelligent email.
Super well-written.
So they're estimating this particular project will emit 1.37 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's the pollution impact of 20,000 daily flights across the world for 25 years.
Yeah, that's insane. I can only imagine like the physical mass of this mine.
It's hard to grasp an actual amount. And then, before people even start thinking about how gas can benefit us and everything like that, this gas in particular, it's being exported. 80% of it will be exported internationally. So it will not benefit Australia. It'll benefit these already very wealthy companies that reside in Australia.
100%. I find it so ironic that a lot of the times people are like, oh, we need to drill more to make the fuel prices cheaper because like everywhere in the world, Australia's got higher fuel prices. And we have never really used a lot of our gas or coal mining capability. Like we are the largest gas exporter in the world and one of the largest coal exporters in the world, depending on which website you look at. It's nothing to do with us. Yet somehow when we see certain politicians up there, they say, we want to lower the prices, so we're going to mine more. Whereas
we're doing this for you.
We're doing this, but it's absolutely not. Like, yes, it stimulates the economy to a certain extent, but the resource, we're using our valuable resources on this beautiful country we have and sending the products overseas for someone else to use. Like, that's so ridiculous.
And we're also trying to cut taxes of these companies that are just so wealthy. So really we won't benefit from it at all. So, further on, like climate damage is here right now. It's not something that we're seeing in the future. Our droughts are becoming drier. The farming is becoming tougher. It's making floods and fires more extreme, which we're seeing even around people that we know. And then this is also putting animal habitats at risk. There's just zero good that can come out of it. And it's so hard to fathom how people think it will. And then, there are top climate scientists that have made it very clear that pollution needs to be dropped by 75% this decade. And then we've got these company giants like Woodside proposing new polluting gas projects like Scarborough. It's just taking us in the exact opposite direction.
100%. It's so weird that this is still going on, given that, I think recently over the last 3 months, I've seen a lot of positive news regarding renewable projects and infrastructure. Like, I think Victoria is aiming to be 95% renewable by 2035. I think ACT is much the same. Australia is 70% by 2050 or something like that. And then you hear, I don't know what WA's plans are with this, because this project would absolutely decimate it. And the only way I see it fitting into the national target is like a carbon offset scheme, which we know doesn't work anyway.
But it's probably not going towards our targets because we're not using the gas.
Oh, I don't know actually how that works. Because we mine it, wouldn't it? That's a really good question.
I really don't know.
Well, I also had another thought, like when you're talking about like the floods and fires that are affecting us. So right now we've got a lot of country, Victoria, really on high alert, and like a lot of the rivers are flooding. I actually saw a video of the town of Richmond. This guy swimming, and the news has footage of this guy swimming in like the flood zone. And they're like, mate, what are you doing? And I'll put the video up. It's actually quite funny. He's like, oh, well, I had to go feed my chickens.
If it's flooded, forget it. But not for this local, wading in water up to his neck. At least he was wearing a life jacket.
Yeah, I just had to go feed the chickens.
Seriously?
Yeah. I'm alright,
And I'm like, animals are stranded. Like
They are.
When you said stranded,
helpless.
I'm like, absolutely. These poor cattle and the chickens. And this farmer obviously had to go, otherwise and I don't like to think of animals as commodities, but that's his commodities at risk. And, farmers are copying it. People always say, oh, I won't go vegan because I don't want to desert the farmer. But the farmers are getting screwed, like really, really hard. And I want to mention it because it is an important point. Like you're not, to go plant-based and to be an environmentalist, you are sticking up for the farmer. You're not removing funding from their wallet. You're doing the exact opposite, and you're letting them have a future that's potentially full of prosperity.
They just need to farm different things other than animals, right?
100%.
Well, the International Energy Agency says to reach net zero emissions by 2050, we must stop developing and exploiting any new gas fields right now. If we're going to make sure that we're not reaching catastrophic climate damage, new gas mining problems like Scarborough simply can't go ahead. Just can't happen.
I like specifically mentioning, like you said, International Energy Agency, because much like the IPCC, they're a third party, but they're also, they're not a renewables, powerhouse. Now they talk for renewables, but they used to talk for fossil fuels.
Of course.
So they talked for what was relevant at the time, what needed to be done. So I think one of the biggest...
so they've changed with the times.
They've changed with the times. It's like
necessary.
This big company was like, oh, no, we need to stop doing this, start doing that. So I think it's really important when we say these guys say we should go the opposite way. Like, oh, maybe there's something here.
Definitely.
Well, there is a chance that the next pandemic will be caused by climate change. And I didn't want to use the P word, but it's kind of true. And I read this study that was recently published looking at ice sediments and the viral spillover risk if ancient Arctic ice were to melt. So this is something that came on my radar, I think, from an article that was shared around. And I actually wanted to look at the exact study that was published because I found this super fascinating. So I'll just put a few boring details in there, then I'll divulge just to give everyone context. So a group of scientists went with metagenomics, which is an interesting word. It means studying the genetic material recovered directly from environmental samples. So really, really cool. And they focused on soil and land sediments of Lake Hudson, which is a high Arctic freshwater lake. It's the highest in the world. So they used DNA and RNA sequencing to reconstruct the lake's virosphere, which is just a total pool of viruses on the planet. So they looked at all of this, and this was the first study of its kind. And there's been other ones that have looked at different things, but we've discovered viruses that are 35,000 years old. And what they found was the samples that they got, which wasn't a lot, and I'll leave a lot more of the specific details on the website, but 1% of the total samples were actual viruses with a risk potential. The rest of them were just bacteria and other things like that. But even if it's low, the risk is still there. And because it's the first study of any kind, I thought it was interesting to mention because a lot more research has to be done in this area, because this is just one lake in one part of the world where something has melted and they've discovered a 15,000-year-old virus.
That's crazy.
Isn't that just, you don't think about it, but this virus it's a fossil, it's ancient, and it used to thrive in much different times.
Makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. And it's not the first time. And I want to stress exactly why this is actually really important. In 2016, there was an anthrax breakout in Russia. And it came about when a virus was released from frozen ice caps in the Arctic Circle, and it entered the environment. And it got into a lot of the deer. So about 2,300 reindeer died, and 63 people were evacuated from the quarantine area. A lot of people got sick because they would be eating the meat, but also they were eating the vegetation around was affected as well. So it's ancient. And I think from memory, that virus was like 30,000 years old. Ice cap melted, boom, it was released into the environment. Within weeks, hundreds and thousands of animals died. So it's really, you never think about this very particular and specific consequence of climate change. Because, with animal ag, like antibiotic resistance is another thing that people are very passionate about. But melting ice caps to release viruses sounds like some horror movie.
And it's not as if we've been studying these viruses for, hundreds of years like we have with our current viruses that we're still dying from. We've had hundreds of years to study these current viruses, yet people are still dying. And now we're going to have all of these new viruses that didn't exist to us for the last tens of thousands of years. And now
That's actually a
we're going to
really good
have
point.
no defense.
Really good point, because the authors in the study that was published said there was two key major limitations. One was their small sample size, but the second was they were only looking at known viruses. That was their main indicator. How are you going to know? You're looking for ghosts. You're looking for theoretical possibilities. So that is, I think that's a strong point. Like this anthrax, we knew about, fortunately. But why is 35,000 years old the limit? The planet's been here much longer than that, and viruses have been here they were one of the first, I guess, what would you call them?
Atoms?
I'm not even sure what the biological term for them would be, but they are old as hell. So yeah, definitely something to think about in conversations.
Labor plans to re-establish a government-owned energy company. So back to Australia. And this isn't in my good news segment because it's election time. Election's coming up next month. We hear lots of, promises being thrown around. So obviously this isn't something set in stone. This isn't actually something that's going ahead, but it is a proposal. And this is the way that Labor wants to take this. So I think it was like 30 years ago, the Liberal government sold and privatised our energy. And since that, look, I dare say from my own experience that prices have increased, infrastructure hasn't really gotten any better. So the idea behind this, making it a public government entity, would be that we could control the prices of the bills that you're going to be receiving, and also the fact that if there's any profits, it's going to go straight back into it. So these are the good points. And of course, again, it is just a proposal at this stage. And of course, big things always get thrown around. So we'll just watch this space. But I quote, "We will end reliance of privatised coal and transition Victoria to cleaner, cheaper, renewable electricity by 2035, creating thousands of jobs." And again, as you mentioned, the plan is to get 95% renewable electricity by 2035 and reach net zero emissions by 2045. So that's how they plan to get there. Let's see if that actually happens. We'll just hold out.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff getting thrown around election time.
Of course,
so
always.
How good is it that we can hear that, become educated about it, regardless of where you are in the world, and actually start to create a habit of keeping these politicians to account? Because, if you're lucky enough to live in a democratic system, your vote counts, and you don't stop there. You don't stop at the voting polls. You, like Sean mentioned at the beginning, email these politicians. I email politicians when there's a reform happening or something, like a campaign. And a lot of the time I'm not writing the email. These different companies are just doing it for you. Give you a template. That's right.
I think Greenpeace even did one for the Woodside one. So
ACF would do them. Lots of different companies do it. So that's a really good way to get involved in the political scene and actually make a difference at such a high level. Is it time for the deep dive? Or have you got another story?
No, take us away with a deep dive.
All right. Let's talk food waste and the consequences that can leave the population starving. I don't think a lot of people really understand the fact that 33% to 40% of the world's food is lost or wasted every year. Like, that's more than 2 billion tons. That's a crazy amount to even fathom. Of course, this is exacerbated by situations such as the war in Ukraine, climate change, and, dare I say it again, the pandemic. 800 million people each year are suffering from hunger. That's crazy. And I just wanted to clarify the terms food loss and food waste. to kick us off. So food waste, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, is the discard of edible foods at the retail and consumer levels. For example, food that makes its way from a retailer's warehouse to a store shelf, or people throwing out leftovers. And you'll be going a little bit more into that later on. And then we have food loss, which on the other hand happens at the source. The FAO defines it as the decrease in edible food mass at the production, post-harvest, and processing stages of the food chain. Food loss in general is quite heartbreaking, but the secondary effects are alarming as well. The water consumption linked to food loss and waste amounts to approximately 1/4 of the world's freshwater supply, which, if you've watched a documentary like Eating Our Way to Extinction, is starting to run quite short. Greenhouse gas emissions from food loss and waste constitutes about 8% of the global total. That's at least 4 times more than the aviation industry. And then, we've got situations where celebrities are flying so short, but even with all that combined, that doesn't even hold a candle up to food loss and waste. Not to discount the fact that that is absolutely crap of them, but what you and I can see, whether we're eating out or at home, is food waste. Leftovers getting thrown out, food going off, stuff like this. In reality, up to the half of the food doesn't even get by humans, worth an estimated $600 billion is lost at or near the farm, during or just after the harvest. When we're talking about bang for buck or the 80-20 rule, I'm sure a lot of people can see why prioritizing this issue can charter powerful social and economic improvements. It's obviously not great for business either, food loss, of course, even if it's a tax write-off. McKinsey actually did an analysis that found that the cost of this waste is often equal to or greater than the retailer's net profit, even the best performing ones. Now, here's what gets me really excited about this. Globally right now, the cost of living is rising. Healthy food is becoming quite a luxury. And there are proposed technologies and solutions available that can see the retailer and the wholesaler food chain cut their food waste by up to 70%. So with that, retailers could reduce their cost of the goods sold by 3 to 6% and manufacturers by 5 to 10%, creating a healthy margin, more food equity, and higher access of food for communities of all kinds. So one of the biggest problems we're facing right now could be solved with this exact technology. So what exactly is getting wasted? As we know, meat and dairy have the highest environmental impact per unit produced, but meat actually only accounts for 3% of food loss. Dairy is at 5%. It's actually fruits, vegetables, cereals, roots, and tubers that account for a lot of the food loss and associated CO2 emissions and water use.
Cereals really surprised me there.
Really?
Yeah, well, because you can keep them so long term.
Oh, well, it's like wheat, grain, barley,
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. I think it's more like, picture this situation with the Ukraine right now. They're one of the largest exporters of wheat, but a lot of their farms are now inoperable because of the war. So it's not just getting wasted because crap harvesting.
Yeah.
They physically
and what about the
have,
flooding? Is that included that as well?
that is included
Yeah,
in
'cause
certain situations. Climate change.
Yeah, northern Victoria at the moment is quite a heavily farmed area for wheat and barley.
100%.
And that's underwater at the moment, so that's all gone to waste as well.
Well, if you want to know another example close to home, we had that big meme going around where iceberg lettuce was like $10 a head or $20.
$12, yeah.
Whatever that was a head because of the flooding that happened on the northern rivers. So there's a lot that gets wasted. And of course, Shepparton is going to have a lot go off in terms of dairy milk, but that still accounts for such a small percent. But not to discount the fact that the original production of that is where the waste is, not the food loss portion of it. So let's look at the almighty tomato, or in Spanish, tomate. So they're the biggest lost vegetable. So of all the vegetables, tomatoes win. So 50 to 75 million tons of them are lost upstream at the source every year. That's a stupid amount of tomatoes. So in developed countries, out of every 100 tomatoes, only 59 to 72 make it to a store shelf. In the developing world, this gets worse. Only 35 to 58 get it onto the store shelf. So I'm going to walk you through something and we're going to go on a little journey together.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
This just makes me feel really bad about that Spanish festival.
La Tom Latina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saying that, I feel like most of the tomatoes are rotten and yuck anyway, but
Well, that makes it sound better of people throwing that at each other. Yeah, it does seem like a bit of a wasteful. But like, I don't know if it's like appropriate to say that about a cultural thing,
it's hard, isn't it?
because I'm not sure what the history of that is, what the reasoning is. Does that count as waste, or does that count as, is it rotten? I'm not sure what the go is there.
Just feeling really guilty right now.
Yeah. When I actually was writing this down and doing research, I actually thought of the festival in Spain, and I'm like, I wonder where that would sit with it ethically, because it's like a lot of things, like just because culturally this was the way doesn't make it acceptable anymore, because times
absolutely.
change. But
Well, the Spanish also have a festival that you climb a greasy pole, and I mean it's greasy because it's got pig fat all over it, and then there's a ham at the top of the pole. Like,
there's some weird stuff
Oh,
Spanish
man.
do, and they do the bull festival, and they're just
yeah, and that's not nice either.
I don't know how driven by ethics these people are.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, just
No, yeah, it's a good thought, because I did think about it as well.
And I was like, I wonder if that's contributing to why the tomato is the most wasted.
I wonder how many tons would be used.
Actually, I think they did tell us when we were there.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's an Instagram story post after this goes up.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say 100 tomatoes are ripe and ready to be picked. 100 is a nice, sweet number. During the harvest, 19 to 27 tomatoes are left in the field. As organic fertilizer, they can be also turned to animal feed, or simply just discarded, or the machine didn't pick them up. So then they're transported into plastic crates to the handling stage, where 1 to 2 are discarded or lost. Or I also imagine in part of these stages, one is kind of grabbed and just
I was
snacked
going to
on.
say, I wonder
Yeah.
if the workers just get to take one home to...
Oh, for sure. Now, then they get washed and sorted, in which time 3 to 4 are discarded or are outgraded, so they don't think it's consumer quality. Then it's time to get packaged up into plastic containers for the consumer, where a further 1 to 2 tomatoes get either outgraded again, discarded, or lost. Then they go on to refrigerated transport to be delivered to distribution centres. In this time, 4 to 6 tomatoes are damaged, packed incorrectly, mislabeled, or simply sent to the wrong destination. That leaves us with the final number of 59 to 72 tomatoes ready to be purchased from the retailer.
Out of 100.
Out of 100, yeah. So, look, there is a lot of different... That's what makes this problem a little bit more complicated. There's a lot of different stages there. And so there are improvements that we can make on every single one of those, which also makes it kind of good in a way that you can just focus on one at a time. Now, this system, like we just discovered, has a myriad of different issues. Then on top of that, there are many other things that can damage produce. So like we mentioned, weather events, poor equipment maintenance, overproduction due to market uncertainty, and excessive post-harvest grading, so like soil damage, things like this. Now, here's how we can turn this into a big fat win. For you and I, we simply have to be demanding a better system since the losses are not occurring at our end in this situation. On the business end, however, there needs to be a complete mindset overhaul. Right now, food loss is seen as an inevitable business expense. In reality, it's a result of inefficiencies and missed opportunities across the production line, procurement, R&D, the supply chain, and sales. If properly addressed, all stakeholders can be happy. What they need is targets. And we can't set and achieve targets without first identifying what the exact issue is. This is where third-party organizations come in, interview the team, the farmer, look at the supply chain, find out the how much, why, where, and so forth. So this really isn't tracked well across the board. Just like with antibiotics, if anyone's looked at that, a lot of the times the farmers are responsible to dealing with this. They already have 101 million jobs to do. They shouldn't be responsible. And of course, if they have targets to meet, what's stopping them? I'm not I'm not pointing the blame at anyone, but what's stopping them from maybe lying or not understanding the issue properly? Why do they have to learn another thing? So
It's very hard to police something like that.
correct. And this is very much the same thing. It's hard to police food loss, which is why third-party organizations need to be set to the test, run by ideally NGOs and not funded by the farmer. So there needs to be some sort of system. If it is government funded, that's okay. But there definitely needs to be targets set for these companies. So there are lots of different solutions, like I mentioned, and there's a really cool graph I'll post up on the website as well, where grocers can actually reduce upstream food loss by 50 to 70%. But I hope that kind of gave a good run through as to what food loss is, how it works, and I suppose what we can be thinking about. And when I was actually doing the research for this, before I let you take it away with food waste, is, you know, it's so funny. If we go to a farmer's market where, you know, the whole concept of shopping, going local, there's a lot less processes involved. So for me, when I was doing this, even though the rhetoric is, you know, it's not the consumer's fault, it's the production line's fault. And that's the whole rhetoric according to any study you read. But I'm like, if you shop local and you go to a farmer's market where instead of these 6 processes, there's 2, you are technically voting for a better system on your end to reduce food loss as well. So that's something I thought about when it comes to food loss. And another reason to, well, way to reduce your greenhouse gases because you're doing less transportation, but also the food loss is, like I mentioned, 4 times the aviation industry. So it's something to think about as well. If you have the opportunity to go local, go to a farmer's market, and
It's not always that easy, is it?
It's not. That's why I specifically said if you have the opportunity, because, you know, for us to go to a farmer's market that is actually quite good, we might have to drive to the city where there is one. And does that over equate the greenhouse gases from the car we rode or the public transport we had to take? How does that settle in when we have a grocery store next to us?
And we're seeing more and more about these, ugly fruit and veg being
that cool
sold.
box, yeah.
So, you know, I think Woolies have a section in some areas that they've got like the ugly fruit. Go and pick it from there first, because not a lot of people will. And really, a carrot's a carrot no matter how many dangly
Little
things
legs
it's got.
Yeah.
Like, really. But yeah, that's another way of trying to reduce it without having to go to a supermarket.
100%. Do you want to take us away with some food waste facts?
So I've looked at household waste in Victoria, which is where we're from in Melbourne. 250,000 tonnes of edible food is thrown away each year. This is enough to fill Melbourne's Eureka Tower.
Wow, and
So-
that's like 50 stories or even more. Wow.
A bit more that.
Yeah.
So Eureka Tower, for other people, it's actually Melbourne's tallest building. So it would be 70 or 80 stories,
High.
I'd say. Yeah, really, really high. The average household in Victoria throws away $2,136 a year in wasted food. What do you think you could do with that extra $2,000 a year?
I would buy more food.
Yeah. So the environmental impact of this household waste is just what I want to touch on now. So food thrown into the garbage bin will end up in landfill. Food in landfill breaks down in a way that can create greenhouse gases, including methane, which affect air quality and public health. When we waste food, we also waste the resources used to grow the food, water, soil, energy, which you've touched on, and all the energy used to process, package, transport the food from the markets to our homes. So it's not just, it's just one tomato. It's a lot. It's a big process. And I just want to touch on how this is our sustainability tip on how to reduce food waste in your household. I've got 4 tips. First one, take inventory of what you have before going shopping. Check what's what you've got in the fridge. If you've got four tomatoes left over, don't go and buy more tomatoes. Maybe do a meal plan to suit, especially for those first few days when those tomatoes are probably going to go off. 2, do a shopping list and make sure you can use everything. For example, if you have use for a broccoli head and the florets, find a recipe that you can use the stem in as well. And is it Plant You? She's got a great scrappy cooking segment on
really
Instagram.
cool.
It's so good. So, yeah.
Shout out to Plant You.
Yes. 3rd, use food that's on its way out first. Even if you don't feel like eating it now, just cook it up and you can eat it later or freeze it. And 4th, compost any remaining scraps. And then, of course, it's not just the food that we're wasting, it's all of the packaging that comes with the food. So Australians throw away around 1.9 million tonnes of packaging each year, enough to fill the MCG 9 times over. And again, for context, the MCG is, I think, the biggest stadium in the world.
In the world?
Or one of.
Cool.
Do you need a fact check? Maybe I need to fact check that. But it holds just over 100,000 people. So it is ginormous.
It is big.
Yeah. To be able to fill that.
11th largest
Damn
globally. Is the largest stadium in the southern hemisphere.
Oh, okay, we'll take that.
Take that. 11th largest globally. It's still like big. Like that is huge.
Yeah. Where's number 1?
I will look it up while you're talking.
Okay. So the packaging takes a lot of energy, water, and other natural resources to produce, and packaging waste pollutes our air, water, and soil. So let's reduce, reuse, and recycle packaging as much as possible, which we've honed on about a lot, but it does go hand in hand with food waste. Have you got us an answer?
Well, I've got us the biggest cricket stadium, but I think the biggest stadium is actually Rongrado First of May Stadium, which is in North Korea.
Okay.
Oddly enough, the capacity is 150,000.
Okay.
It goes. The area is about
What do they do
51
there?
acres. You know what's so funny? As I'm looking at this, and maybe I'll post a picture. It's actually looks like a saluting thing to Kim Jong-un in there, and they've just filled it. Maybe it's a dance, but yeah. And also it's believed to have public executions there.
Okay, let's
Oh wait, during halftime at the weekly football game,
what?
like public executions during halftime.
Okay.
That's really weird. Okay. That's a really nice side tangent. Don't look at the top stadium in the world. Anyway, it's big. It can fit a lot of people.
And packaging.
And packaging. You know, as you were actually talking about the 4 main facts, I thought of something really cool. Maybe we can make it. So, you know how like Dr. Will B talks about, you know, your 30 plants a week, your plant points. What if there was like a system, easy way to think about like the 10 things you do before you go out for a shop, or the 10 ways to reduce your food waste? Because there's lots of ways you can really reduce it. Like you don't want to eat your carrot because it's floppy. Just pop it in a glass of water and you'll start getting hard again. Like there is a lot. And this work, very seldom people are going to be rich enough to just not care about saving food. And even if you were rich, you should be caring about the environmental impact of not going and buying more food when the food in your fridge is good enough. Freezing, huge thing. The amount of bread we've got, I don't know if there's a limit to what you can freeze, but it is really good. And there's not a lot of facilities you need to be able to reduce your food waste. Even with the composting thing, there's apps on there, there's Facebook groups, there's ways you can do it even if you don't have a home compost. But yeah, it is important to reduce food waste. So good sustainability tip. And that is our deep dive. Let's take it away with the good news story, shall we?
How many have you got?
I think I've got 5. So this is the most amount of good news stories I've ever had.
Okay, take it away.
Yeah, let's do it. So the European comeback for wolves, bears, and more. So Rewilding Europe did a report that looked at 50 animal species, and the main findings were actually quite positive. So the Eurasian beaver showed the largest range increase at 835% since 1955. The next biggest increase was the European bison, which expanded its range by roughly 400% since 1971. And funny enough, herbivore species tended to increase more than carnivorous species. So I'm not sure what the go was there. Could be just luck. So 19 of the 25 studied bird species had increased since 1980. And of the 50 species studied in total, only the 6 birds and 1 mammal were in decline. So great news for Europe. And a few other stats here. So for mammals, they found the best correlation for population increase was due to harvest management, such as limiting hunting permissions. Go figure. We stopped letting people kill the animals, and the animals went up in population. So mind blown. And for bird species, they found that the best recovery was legal protection from shooting, egg collection, and disturbance, followed by habitat management, protection, and restoration. So don't be shooting things.
Well, I learned something today.
Yeah, the more you know. Yeah, and actually, I think a really nice note for this. So I don't know if anyone's like interested in birding or stuff, but you know how there's apps that you can say you spotted a bird, or even like if you're Australian, there's an app for magpie. So if you spot a magpie in a street that's doing a swoop, you record it on this app. And so Rewilding Europe said that citizen science was actually one of their best ways that they were able to track different species by people just inputting what bird and what species they saw where. So how cool is that in terms of a community effort to track the restoration of different wildlife populations?
All exports of livestock by sea from New Zealand will cease. The passing of the...
Will cease?
Cease.
Will cease. Live exporting because it's shipped by sea. Will cease.
The passing of the... Thank you for that interruption. The passing of the Animal Welfare Amendment Bill means livestock exports from New Zealand will stop on the 30th of April 2023. The New Zealand government started a review of the livestock export trade in 2019 after, I don't know if you remember this, after a wild storm sank an export ship.
Jeez, no, I don't remember that. That's super brutal.
Yeah, 41 crew died, 6,000 cattle died.
Whoa, that's insane.
New Zealand have been really focusing on this since it happened. So it's taken 4 years for this tragedy to get this bill to pass. I think only 2 New Zealanders that died from the tragedy, but still. It's 41 crew altogether. And the fact that New Zealand is relatively far from countries to export these animals, it's cruel. It's
a long journey.
Yeah, they suffer so much more. And apparently now all eyes are on the UK to follow in their footsteps.
Oh, why the UK in particular?
I couldn't answer that question.
Should be Australia that's looking at that. Even though we're banning sheep but not cattle.
Yeah, it was one but not the other. That's right. So, but it's a step in the right direction. I was reading up on beefcentral.com that the farmers weren't so happy about this and the fact that there's a lot of revenue that's going to be lost and the economy will suffer. But, I think it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, the cows will, however, hopefully suffer less.
Oh, they definitely. Well, I think they will.
Yeah.
Days at sea.
I'd say months. New Zealand, I think the one for Australia, our usual export time was 44 days.
That's horrible.
Yeah. So it's not a good, so I'm stoked with that.
Yeah.
So more people are buying for ethical reasons than cost alone. Market trends. So according to a consumer survey, 49% of Gen Z and 44% of millennial shoppers consider whether a brand is Black owned when they make buying decisions. Now, the reason this is actually especially good news is that Minority Business Development Agency data found that minority-owned small businesses have 32% fewer employees and 42% lower receipts than non-minority-owned businesses. Now, pair this with lower loan approval rates and less startup capital. This often means that minority-owned businesses start small and just stay small. So the fact that Gen Zers and millennials are starting to think about that in their buying decision is actually fantastic news.
Yeah, it's really cool. Is it anything to do with the products themselves as well? They're ethical or?
Well, no, it's not. No. One of the limitations that I was actually reading about with minority-owned businesses is because seems to be like a population understanding or bias that if you're a black-owned business, the population thinks that your products are for black populations.
Okay.
So that was actually a really strange finding that this consumer study did. So the fact that this is starting to curb, because it was a really big problem, and that was actually one of the main reasons that they stayed small, because they couldn't expand beyond their, I guess, cultural demographic.
Plant-based meals as primary options for patients in New York public hospitals.
I saw this and I'm so stoked about that.
I know, how cool. So the Better Food Foundation has partnered with New York City Health and Hospitals and the Mayor's Office to make plant-based meals the default at all 11 New York City hospitals. It also kind of interests me that they only had 11 public hospitals.
Yeah, for a wait, is this public or? Well,
public.
It's all, right. That's, for a population of 9 million, that does not seem like a lot. That's, 1 million people per hospital?
But then again, what does public hospital mean?
Subsidized at some level? Because I thought they were fully privatized.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well, the first
maybe someone can educate us on that.
The first thing that came to my mind was actually that good news story that you had months and months ago about the school system in New York, and a lot of the parents picking up a stink about like the mac and cheese, and I'm like, I wonder if there's like an equivalent for this story.
Well, this actually seems to be really well received.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
So 50% of the people that are being offered them are taking the plant-based options. So they can opt out for it, opt out. So, but 50% of people are opting for the plant-based, and 95% of those people are happy that they went with the plant-based option.
That is a huge
I thought that was really
rate.
good. Yes. So yeah, very happy with that. So the new dinner program, this is just for dinner. Lunch was already established. I think it was last year or earlier this year.
For plant-based?
Yeah.
Whoa.
So they've expanded it to dinner over the success rate of the lunches. So the lunch program launched in March last year. So dinners this year. Only 1% of people are actually identifying as vegetarian and vegan.
It's so funny that the first thing that came into my mind besides the school situation, so the second thing, was why are people there in the first place? Like, I want to know if someone comes in with a cardiac event, are they more or less likely to opt in for the plant-based option? If someone comes in that's something with an illness that's completely unrelated to a health problem,
or lifestyle.
Yeah, something like a broken foot or whatever it may be, what are their chances of opting out of the plant-based meal compared to accepting it? And again, subsector, and then what is their approval rating? So are people, I would imagine that once you have some sort of cardiac event, you would be more likely to opt in for the plant-based option. It's like, when you come to a new year, you're like, oh, I'm ready to be
New me.
healthy. Yeah, I've just been slapped in the face with life. I've heard vegetables are healthy. Let me try this.
I think that would be the case if they have linked their lifestyle to that cardiac event.
Good point.
I just don't, sometimes I think that is a complete disconnect.
Yeah.
But with this program, it does seem as though education is coming along with it.
Oh,
So
like
for-
a pamphlet.
Sort of. So for those that need special meals, people with high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, they're actually being given the opportunity to meet with one of more than 100 registered dietitians to learn more about the benefits of a plant-based diet.
Wow.
So it's not just, hey, here's a healthy meal for you. It's, hey, here's a healthy meal for you, and this is why. So I think that would definitely stick more and help with these lifestyle issues that these people are having.
The reason that potentially they're there in the first place.
Correct. So some of the meals that you can find are Thai noodle bowls, Spanish vegetable paella with yellow rice, and a southern black-eyed pea casserole. Yeah.
Sounds decent.
Just a couple of the options.
Nice. Woolworths and Big W are banning glitter sales this Christmas. So this is really good. So the Woolworths Group have come out and said that glitter is made from pieces of plastic so small that they are defined as microplastics and that they are toxic to the environment.
Wow.
Yeah, so they've still got a glitter range and a variety of different products such as books and journals. And they've said that they're actively actually looking to removing all aspects of glitter from their stores.
That's incredible. I love that they've identified this as a problem because really where does glitter go? I don't even know what people use glitter for anymore, but...
Festivals, you put them on your face.
Yeah, I suppose. And then where do they end up? In the soil. And then what happens to the soil? You then plant crops and then the plastic is just, it's just a huge, disgusting cycle that is so avoidable. So good on them for identifying that. Australian cricketers push for greater say on sponsorships. Pat Cummins.
Sorry, Pat.
Sorry, Pat. The National Test and ODI captain. I don't really know what that means, but sounds very impressive, Pat.
Good job, Pat. You deserve a pat on the back.
He has called for more climate-conscious corporate partners. So, for example, Alinta's parent company, which is Pioneer Sales Holdings, has been listed as one of Australia's highest carbon emitters.
Okay.
And they are partnered with Cricket Australia. So they've actually agreed to end the deal, the sponsorship, $40 million deal.
Whoa.
Ended. Gone. Big Bash League players will be allowed to play without meat or fast food logos on their caps or helmets for religious reasons, veganism, or sustainability reasons. I think this
that fast food one has got me through the moon.
Yeah, you've always said that ever since you started watching AFL, and I feel like I was so desensitized to it. Like, you mentioned Macca's and KFC, and I'm like, I didn't even I've been watching AFL my whole life, so I haven't even put two and two together. But as soon as you said it, I'm like, you're right. It's so wrong.
It's no one's if you look at the field, these guys are ripped. They are ready to go. They need to run sprint for kilometers for a 2, 3, 4 hour match, regardless of what sport you're watching, unless it's maybe cricket. But they need to be fit. They're not at home eating KFC and Happy Meals. Not. It's like, why are they perpetrating that onto you? It's like, that is so not fair. That's exactly like having the COP26. Australia had the gas corporate sponsor for their booth. It's that's so... I've always thought that is the worst thing, and that is the one thing that irks me about footy right now and any sport. Seeing an ad pop up on my feed of these footy players or their coaches saying, I'm getting some KFC in me. I'm like, no, you're not.
The coaches maybe.
Yeah, the coaches maybe. But it's so not cool because I don't know if anyone really thinks because people look up to athletes, right? I don't know if anyone thinks to get to that, I need to eat who's sponsoring them.
I don't think so, but I think it's I think of my nephew who's watching the football.
And he's like, I'm craving KFC.
Yeah, all of a sudden, I want Macca's. Why do I want Macca's?
What is this subliminal?
But I need to have it right now. And that'd be mostly what it is because kids love footy. Kids love sport. And it's so good to see cricket going in that direction. Hopefully footy can follow suit. But we had former Wallabies captain David Pocock, who was partnered with Cummins on climate change initiatives.
Right.
He backed the captain's stance, stating, "Sport is already feeling the impact of climate change with extreme heat, bushfire smoke, flooding, leading to cancellations and delays of matches, as well as player and spectator welfare issues. It is clear they can't sit on the sidelines on this issue any longer."
Great.
Yeah.
I don't know cricket, but I've heard of David Pocock, so he must be...
Have you?
I have not. I have. Are we
He
gonna
sounds
get...
like a top bloke.
He does. He sounds like someone... David, if you're listening to the show, mate, which I know you are, come on, have a yarn. Yeah, no, that's really, really good news. I'm stoked with that. German company Wasser 3.0 are using a whirlpool and a specially developed hybrid silica gel to clean up microplastics. So they do this by creating a vortex in a tank of water, and then a compound called Wasser 3.0 PE-X is added, which acts as a clumping agent, drawing together any microplastic into popcorn-shaped lumps that then rise to the surface and can be skimmed off using a sieve.
Wow.
Now this, I've actually read a few studies that okra can do this,
Yeah.
the vegetable okra, and there's actually a few other...
The vegetable?
The vegetable okra,
Really?
yeah. So they use,
incredible.
it's got a compound in the okra that can clump, exact same system. So this student actually out of India wrote her dissertation on okra, and I read it. It was actually really, really well written. So I hope she passes her exam and whatnot. But yeah, it was
It's eaten a lot over in India as well, isn't it? And the Philippines.
India
I don't
and
know.
Egypt and
Oh,
Egypt.
yeah,
are
we
huge.
had it in Egypt, didn't
so,
we?
yeah, it's a really cool technology that we can use. But anyway, this Wasser 3, I just love saying it. Wasser. So I'm imagining Germans would say Wasser.
Wasser.
Yeah, for sure. So it rises to the surface, collect it with a sieve. Now, this is very cool. So when it comes to like food loss and food waste, we knew that food loss comes at the food chain end, food waste at the consumer end. What they plan on doing here is not going to the oceans, but they are looking at sewage treatment plants or industrial processes. So currently, think about microplastics from toothpaste, skincare products, or clothes. They tend to be filtered out at sewage works. Now, according to the UN Environmental Programme, they're then released directly into the oceans, lakes, or rivers. Now, if they're released into rivers, we know that's a huge backlog that goes into the ocean. So what they plan on doing with this is putting it to sewage so it never enters a body of water. It just clumps it up, and then a sieve at the end protects it from exiting. So it's just like a net. If you imagine a net
Yeah.
on the water collecting things, except at a micro level. So this is actually a very cool technology I'm excited about to see if it gets developed further.
Let's hope. I'm loving hearing about all these new technologies that are out and just trying to better the world. It's
Like your
fascinating.
one last month or the month before, that big boat pickup machine.
Yeah.
I still think that's such a cool system. I'd love to just hop on one of those and just like go for a bit of a river cruise. Like, why can't that be a tourist attraction?
Right, it should be.
Yeah. Do you have any more stories for us?
That is it for me.
That is it from me too. Of course, every single one of these episodes goes online at theplantparadigm.com. You can check out further information, especially when it comes to links. So if you want to read the studies that we mentioned, the articles we look at, it goes up with a blog post. And then you'll be able to find a lot of the information that we have there, especially if you want to look into certain things further. Of course, these videos do get put up on YouTube as well if you'd like to watch for those visually inclined. And lastly, leave us a review if you appreciate the pod. 5 stars only. Thank you very much. But we'll see you next time. Stay happy. Eat plants. Peace.